Saturday
Andrew,
morning,
what do you think here? Because,
February
for mere
13th,
civilians, the optics of
and
just
the
hours ago,
impeachment
Democrats saying
trial is
it's time
still
for
going
witnesses,
on. So
which
I
may
have that on
result
in the
in just a
background.
sworn affidavit. How does that appear?
Decided I'm having a really hard time deciding what to do today.
I don't think that
All right, I'm gonna use this new revolution. This one is called Optimum,
the affidavit
Forever
is going
Flawless
to be very
Optimum.
one-sided. Normally, if you're on the other side and someone says we're calling a witness, you're sitting there thinking, I want to cross-examine that person and bring out the facts that I think are
kind
useful.
of like fall colors.
In this situation, you can be pretty darn sure there aren't going to be those facts. So to me, this is sort of raising a white flag saying, you know what, in order to move on, and what they're thinking is get our acquittal, we're willing to actually just put in the record.
I'm glad
I
get to skip at least a couple steps.
That's really what I think
put on my
everybody in that
new
room will understand.
Serum
that
Foundation
it's going to be very
sunscreen.
hard for the Republicans to say, well, we shouldn't believe
It snowed like crazy last night.
You
don't want to go out in it.
They don't actually need to have
you have to
a
protect
live
just
deposition
the
with
reflection
cross-examination. So I think
snow.
In the room, I think it will play fine in terms of saying, look, they basically have to concede those facts. But I do think that to the extent that you're thinking about the American public, there is a hit to the Democratic position here, which is that it is not as sort of convincing about exactly what happened, because you will not have a Republican congresswoman saying under oath, and in a way that you can see her, this is what happened, and I'm willing to stand up and say it. That would be very powerful.
So to give folks a sense of what we're seeing on the left side of our screen, you have been looking at, of course, the Senate chamber. It has filled up. We now know that there are a number of senators in the room. We understand Senator McConnell, I think you might be able to see him there on screen, is seated. Senator Schumer is in the room as well. We were supposed to hear likely about the trial restarting about 28 minutes ago or so, 18 minutes ago, and that has not happened yet. We expect at some point to get a sense of whether there is this deal or not, whether or not there is some kind of an agreement to get this written statement from Congresswoman Butler into the record, or to do something else. That is what we are waiting for here. The trial has been effectively recessed until it's called back in, and the second that happens, we're going to bring it to you live. Senator McCaskill, let me go to you here, because you heard Andrew call it I think he said white
Serum
flag.
Foundation.
In fact, if the House impeachment manages, I think the Senate floor is just gaveling in, so hold that thought. We're going to go in and listen in to see what's going on.
Senate.
Majority Leader, without objection, so ordered. Vanderveen? No, Mr. Castor, I'm sorry.
Have you recognized?
Yes, you are. You are recognized. Senators, Donald John Trump, by his counsel, is prepared to stipulate that if Representative Herrera Butler were to testify under oath as part of these proceedings, her testimony would be consistent with the statement she issued on February 12th, 2021, and the former president's counsel is agreeable to the admission of that public statement into evidence at this time. Thank you, Mr. Castor. Mr. Raskin.
Thank you, Mr. President. The managers are prepared to enter into the agreement. I will now read the statement. This is the statement of Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler, February 12, 2021. In my January 12th statement in support of the article of impeachment, I referenced a conversation House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy relayed to me that he'd had with President Trump while the January 6th attack was ongoing. Here are the details. When McCarthy finally reached the president on January 6th and asked him to publicly and forcefully call off the riot, the president initially repeated the falsehood that it was Antifa that had breached the Capitol. McCarthy refuted that and told the president that these were Trump supporters. That's when, according to McCarthy, the president said, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are." Since I publicly announced my decision to vote for impeachment, I have shared these details in countless conversations with constituents and colleagues, and multiple times through the media and other public forums. I told it to the Daily News of Longview on January 17th. I've shared it with local county Republican executive board members, as well as other constituents who asked me to explain my vote. I shared it with thousands of residents on my telephone town hall on February 8th. Mr. President, I now move that the Senate admit the statement into evidence.
Objection, and without objection, the statement will be admitted into evidence. And does either party wish to make any further motions related to witnesses or documents at this time?
Mr. President, the President's Council have no further motions.
Discussion.
And Mr. President, we have no further motions either.
Excuse me, then the chair would note that neither party wishes to make further motions under Section 6 of Senate Resolution 47. Therefore, the next question is on admission of the evidence submitted by both parties pursuant to Section 8 of the resolution. The majority leader's recommendation.
Now, as we move to another matter, I'm advised that the House managers have no objection to the admission of evidence proposed to be admitted by the former President's Counsel under the provisions of Section 8 of Senate Resolution 47, and that the President's Counsel have no objections to the evidence proposed to be admitted into evidence by the House managers. Pursuant to Section 8 of the resolution, as agreed to by Leader McConnell and myself a few days ago, both parties have made timely filings of this evidence with the Secretary of the Senate and have provided copies to each other. I therefore ask unanimous consent that the Senate dispense with the provisions of Section 8A of Senate Resolution 47, and that the materials submitted by both parties be admitted into evidence, subject to the provisions of Section 8C of that resolution, which provides that the admission of this evidence does not constitute a concession by either party as to the truth of the matters asserted by the other party, and that each senator shall decide for him or herself the weight to be given such evidence. This request has the approval of both parties and the Republican leader.
Without objection, it's so ordered. Okay, then pursuant to the provisions of Senate Resolution 47, the Senate has provided for up to 4 hours of closing arguments. They'll be equally divided between the managers on the part of the House of Representatives and the counsel for the former president. And pursuant to Rule 22 of the Rules of Procedure and Practice in the Senate, when sitting on impeachment trials, the argument shall be open and closed on the part of the House of Representatives. So the chair recognizes Mr. Manager Raskin to begin the presentation on the part of the House of Representatives. Mr. Raskin, under Rule 22, you may reserve time if you wish.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, before I proceed, it was suggested by defense counsel that Donald Trump's conduct during the attack, as described in Congresswoman Butler's statement, is somehow not part of the constitutional offense for which former President Trump has been charged. I want to reject that falsehood and that fallacy immediately. After he knew that violence was underway at the Capitol, President Trump took actions that further incited the insurgents to be more inflamed and to take even more extreme, selective, and focused action against Vice President Mike Pence. Former President Trump also, as described by Congressman Butler's notes, refused requests to publicly, immediately, and forcefully call off the riots. And when he was told that the insurgents inside the Capitol were Trump supporters, the president said, quote, "Well, Kevin, I guess these people are more upset about the election than you are. Think about that for a second. This uncontradicted statement that has just been stipulated as part of the evidentiary record. The president said, well, Kevin, I guess these people, meaning the mobsters, the insurrectionists, are more upset about the election than you are. That conduct is obviously part and parcel of the constitutional offense that he was impeached for, namely incitement to insurrection. That is continuing incitement to the insurrection. The conduct described not only perpetuated his continuing offense, but also provides to us here today further decisive evidence of his intent to incite the insurrection in the first place. When my opposing counsel says that you should ignore the president's actions after the insurrection began, that is plainly wrong. And it, of course, reflects the fact that they have no defense to his outrageous, scandalous, and unconstitutional conduct in the middle of a violent assault on the Capitol that he incited. Senators, think about it for a second. Say you light a fire and you're charged with arson. And the defense counsel says, everything that I did after the fire started is irrelevant. And the court would reject that immediately and say, that's not true at all. It's extremely relevant to whether or not you committed the crime. If you run over and try to put out the flames, if you get lots of water and say, help, help, there's a fire, if you call for help, a court will could infer that you didn't intend for the fire to be lit in the first place. They would accept your defense, perhaps, that it was all an accident. It was all accident. Accidents happen with fire. But if, on the other hand, when the fire erupts, you go and you pour more fuel on it, you stand by and you watch it gleefully, any reasonable person will infer that you not only intended the fire to start, but that once it got started and began to spread, you intended to continue to keep the fire going.
Push.
And that's exactly where we are, my friends. Of course, your conduct while a crime is ongoing is relevant to your culpability, both to the continuation of the offense, but also directly relevant, directly illuminating to what your purpose was originally. What was your intent? And any court in the land would laugh out of court any criminal defendant who said, what I did after I allegedly killed that person is irrelevant to whether or not I intended to kill them. I mean, come on. Donald Trump's refusal not only to send help, but also to continue to further incite the insurgents against his own vice president. His own vice president provides further decisive evidence of both his intent to start this violent insurrection and his continued incitement once the attack had begun to override the Capitol. All right. Senators, that was in response to this new evidentiary particle that came in. But in my closing, I want to thank you for your remarkable attention and your seriousness of purpose befitting your office. We've offered you overwhelming and irrefutable and certainly unrefuted evidence that former President Trump incited this insurrection against us. To quote the statement Representative Liz Cheney made in January, quote, on January 6, 2021, a violent mob attacked the United States Capitol to obstruct the process of our democracy and stop the counting of presidential electoral votes. This insurrection caused injury, death, and destruction in the most sacred space in our republic. She continued. Representative Cheney continued. Much more will become clear in coming days and weeks, but what we know now is enough. The President of the United States summoned this mob, assembled this mob, and lit the flame of this attack. Everything that followed was his doing. None of this would have happened without the president. The president could have immediately and forcefully intervened to stop the violence. He did not. There has never been a greater betrayal by the President of the United States of his office and his oath to the Constitution. I will vote to impeach the President. Representative Cheney was right. She based her vote on the facts, on the evidence, and on the Constitution. And evidence, the video, documentary, eyewitness has only grown stronger and stronger and more detailed right up till today, right up to 10 minutes ago, over the course of this Senate trial. And I have no doubt that you all noticed that despite the various propaganda reels and so on, President Trump's lawyers have said almost nothing to contest or overcome the actual evidence of former President Trump's conduct that we presented, much less have they brought their client forward to tell us his side of the story. We sent him a letter last week, which they rejected out of hand. The former President of the United States refused to come and tell us, and I ask any of you, if you were charged with inciting violent insurrection against our country and you were falsely accused, would you come and testify? I know I would. I'd be there at 7 o'clock in the morning waiting for the doors to open. I'm sure that's true of 100 senators in this room. I hope it's true of 100 senators in this room. Senate was lectured several times yesterday about cancel culture. Well, not even 2 weeks ago, the president's most reliable supporters in the House, I'm sorry, not the president, the former president's most reliable supporters in the House tried to cancel out Representative Cheney because of her courageous and patriotic defense of the Republic and the truth and the Constitution. They tried to strip her of her leading role as chair of the House Republican Conference. But you know what? I hope everybody takes a second to reflect on this. The conference rejected this plainly retaliatory and cowardly attempt to punish her for telling the truth to her, constituents and her country and voting for impeachment. Who says you can't stand up against bullies?
And that was...
Who says? In my mind, Liz Cheney is a hero for standing up for the truth and resisting this retaliatory cancel culture that she was subjected to. But she beat them on a vote of 145 to 61.
Now I need
more
my
than 2
glitter
vote.
stripe.
You know, Ben Franklin, a great champion of enlightenment, an enemy of political fanaticism and cowardice, and of course another great Philadelphian, once wrote this: I have observed that wrong is always growing more wrong until there is no bearing it anymore, and that right, however opposed, comes right at last. Comes right at last. Think about that. This is America, home of the brave, land of the free. The America of Ben Franklin, who said, if you make yourself a sheep, the wolves will eat you. Don't make yourself a sheep. The wolves will eat you. The America of Thomas Jefferson, who said at another difficult moment, a little patience and we shall see the reign of witches pass over, their spirits dissolve, and the people, recovering their true sight, restore their government to its true principles. The America of Tom Paine, who said, the mind, once enlightened, cannot again become dark. Now, we showed you hour after hour of real-time evidence demonstrating every step of Donald Trump's constitutional crime. We showed you how he indoctrinated the mob with his Orwellian propaganda about how the election he lost by more than 7 million votes and 306 to 232 in the electoral college, which he had described as a landslide when he won by the exact same margin in 2016, was actually a landslide victory for him being stolen away by a bipartisan conspiracy and fraud and corruption.
So
we showed you how
that's it for today. This is almost over. Next week, though, this will be done, I hope, I think.
from the
Anyway,
lowest courts in the
thank you
land
for
to the
being
United
there. Be
States
safe
Supreme
out
Court
there. Wear your
across the
mask.
street, and 8
And
federal
please
judges
follow
he himself
and
named
bring your friends.
to the bench all found no basis in fact or law for